Hello and welcome to the Choreolosophy Podcast. Episode 53, The Enneagram as a Tool for Harmonious Rehearsals with Kailin Kane. This is a little bit of a different kind of episode because I'm not really intending to give you any full, in-depth answers in this episode, really just to whet your appetite and partly mine for an idea that I've never come across before. The Enneagram can create some really interesting insights for a director or a group leader when facilitating rehearsals. If we can become familiar with the insights that the Enneagram has into personalities and what our underlying motivations and our underlying fears are, then we might be able to facilitate better rehearsals. And I am definitely excited about this possibility to explore in the future. So this episode is kind of an introduction for many of you, if you're not familiar with the Enneagram, into what it is, but also some ideas that we discuss over the course of the episode about the ways that a music teacher could benefit from this knowledge. So stick around. I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. Before we get to the episode, a couple announcements. I'm looking forward to a convention in Atlanta in April, and I really think this is going to be fun. So head over to choreolosophy.com and then /choreolosophy-con, or you can go to ChoreolosophyCon 2021 on Facebook and find the information to get signed up to meet us April 9 through 11 in Atlanta. One of the things you might not be aware of is that the Choreolosophy podcast is entirely listener supported. The content I produce here is free and will stay free. And the way I keep myself solvent and keep the show running is having listeners who I depend on and appreciate helping out. Of course, using the promo code at the affiliates is hugely helpful. But if you want to be more directly involved with helping the underwriting of the costs of the show, you can do that at Patreon. Patreon.com/Choreolosophy. Patreon is just a website that allows membership by voluntary monthly payment to help support a creator of content like myself. So you can go to patreon.com/Choreolosophy and get in the door over there for as little as $3 a month. $3 a month will get you access to the private podcast feed. Once a month, I do some behind-the-scenes episodes that go right into your podcast player alongside the main show, as well as lesson plans, any other types of materials I create along the way for my classroom. I might dump them there, as well as advance notice of who's going to be on the show before the rest of the audience finds out, which means that you can kind of feed me questions of things you'd like to hear me talk about with that guest as they are signing up to come on the show. So head over to Patreon. If you support the efforts of the show and the mission of the show, that's a great way to help out. Special thanks to the producers over at Patreon: Ulrich Igrain Munoz Alarcon, Chandler Smith, David Kowalczyk, James Mock, Kyle Peterson, Michael Herron, Ryan Main, and Steve and Kathy Kakachik. All right, everybody, I'm here with Kailin Kane, and Kailin is a musician that, interestingly, I know because I used to teach her little sister in the choir classroom, and so that's the connection here. But I'll let Kailin tell a little bit more about herself. We're going to be talking about the Enneagram and certain applications that it might have in the music classroom. So why don't you tell us about you first, and then we'll get into the Enneagram.
Okay, sure. Well, I'm an alum of the Lee Summit public school system. Came up through the music program there, and then I have a degree in Oboe Performance from St. Olaf College, and then a little bit of time doing substitute teaching, and then I joined the United States Army in their regional band program. So I was an active duty soldier musician for a little over 13 years, all over the United States and in different countries of the world, and just recently transitioned out of active duty service into part-time reserve service, and I'm a member of the 208th Army Band out of Concord, North Carolina.
That is so cool, and I have I've never actually spoken with a member of a military music organization outside of my father-in-law, but he was in the Air Force Band for a very short period of time.
Cool.
But it didn't really stick. So he's told me some stories, but this is a world that is foreign to me. So when with your interest in the Enneagram and its connections with music, tell us where along that life journey that came about.
So my interest in the Enneagram came about, I'd say about 6 years ago now. And my younger brother, David, sent me a message on Facebook with a link to a podcast. The podcast is called The Liturgist, and that particular episode was called The Enneagram. And he said, listen to this if you want your entire world rocked. And
Okay.
I was like, well,
yeah.
today feels like an okay day to have my world rocked. I'll listen to it. It delivered. It definitely piqued my interest. And just from a journey of self-discovery, it was extremely fascinating to kind of pull back the curtain and figure out why I did some of the things that I do. For the first time, having an awareness of things that I did that were so tacit to my nature that I was almost, unaware of it. I found that very fascinating. I used it to help understand myself and to help understand the important relationships in my life.
That's awesome. And so from that, and I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit more as we go. So you got kind of just as a very basic overview at first, and then I'm assuming over the course of the last few years, you've really started to read more, put it more into practice in your life. And I want to talk about all that. But first, let's pretend like you're talking to someone who's never heard of the Enneagram before at all.
Okay.
How would you explain it to someone?
I would probably explain it in the way that my younger brother did, that it is something that would rock your world in the best possible way. It won't always be a kind experience, but it will just illuminate your personality structure, who you are. It's difficult to describe, really, but I know that many call it a personality typing system. I'm more comfortable with the word theory. It just leaves, some open-ended boundaries on this. This is all theory, but in my experience, it's been extremely accurate.
Right. So I've heard some people say, quibble with even calling it a personality test. Do you agree with that? Do you think it's different than a personality test like Myers-Briggs or like the Colby test or whatever? Would you say it's fairly defined as a personality test?
I think it's fair to define it as that, but as someone who's spent a good number of years and a pretty deep dive into it, I'd feel comfortable promising that there's depths into the Enneagram that other personality tests or other personality systems do not have to offer.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. One of the things that resonated with me at first when I took a class in it, my listeners wouldn't know this because I haven't talked about it yet on the show, but I took a class through our school district and where it was called Intro to the Enneagram. And I'm not really even sure why it was a class for professional development at school because it really had nothing to do with teaching in the context of this class. It was just very truly an introduction to the Enneagram. And so I was just taking it because, it was going to be an easy 3 credits and I get paid more when I earn more credits. So that was a no-brainer for me. But upon taking some of the tests, it really, seemed to cut right to who I was in a way that the other tests don't. And I also resonated with the idea that it says that some of the literature that I read said that it was trying to tap into my underlying motivations for things more than it is just to trying to describe my behaviors. Whereas a Myers-Briggs might describe my behaviors, but Enneagram's more about why you're doing those things. Is that your understanding too?
Yes,
Okay.
And I think that that's an incredibly important distinction to make because I'll just as a disclaimer say that I'm not deeply familiar with Myers-Briggs or some other systems. I am mostly familiar with the Enneagram, but a huge distinction with it is that it's your motivations that drive who you are and what you do. Mm-hmm. Therefore, it is very difficult for another person to determine your number. There's 9 numbers on the Enneagram. It would be very difficult for someone to determine that for another, because they see what you do, but you're the only person who knows why it was that you did it.
That makes so much sense. Yeah,
And
that makes so much sense.
the same behavior could be driven by wildly different motivations.
Right. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so why don't we go next into let's talk a little bit about the connection between Enneagram. You had mentioned there's a connection between Enneagram and music. And how did you come across that, and then how do you apply it?
So for me, the Enneagram has 9 core personality types. So of those 9 types, you have 3 intellectual centers. It's a circular shaped ring with the numbers around the outside. And it's broken up in a kind of peace sign, pi portion, to where you have 3 intelligence centers. There's a body intelligence center, which includes the types 8, 9, and 1. There's a heart intelligence center, which includes the types 2, 3, and 4. And then there's a mind or head intelligence center, which includes the types 5, 6, and 7. So I do have some background in music education and chamber music coaching, because one of my tours of duty in the Army was as an instructor at the Army School of Music. So I had soldier students who were cycling through to become certified to go out and do the job. And I coached many, many, many chamber groups through a rehearsal process to get a performance-ready product in a short, compressed period of time.
Right.
And I found that just an awareness that there are 3 different intelligence centers. Someone might be coming at their experience of trying to make sense of music in a really intuitive, like gut feeling kind of way. They may struggle to describe in really articulate language, this is what's happening, but they might be the person that can just feel the groove,
Yeah.
without thinking too much. It just is a gut instinct. And then you might have someone who's very good, if they're a heart intelligence center, they might be really focused on emoting that the music has a meaning, or they might be deeply concerned with making an audience feel a certain thing. Or in the rehearsal process, they just might be very concerned about the relationships between the people as much as they are the music.
Okay.
So much so that it might be worth it to sacrifice perfection in the music at the expense of the relationship with the person they're making music with.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
And then the head, and a head intelligence center might be your person who is processing their way through making the music better in a really intellectual way. They're going to be the ones that are asking questions about the subdivision of the beat in real mathematical terms, where your gut instinct person is going to glaze over with the math words and the fractions, and they're going to be like, could somebody just say that's how it goes.
Right. Yeah.
So I just found that it was interesting from an educator or coaching standpoint to help mitigate some group frustrations by being able to perceive you're a very heady person. Let's help you in a way that's going to get right at your intellectual style.
Right.
Intellectual center. That was my background in the Enneagram, helping to look at other people differently.
I see.
I didn't feel like there was a lot of time to say, let's take a test. Let's have everyone type themselves. Let me give you, the historical background and the knowledge of this process. But I knew enough information that these intellectual centers exist, so I could ask a few questions to just help, what are you most concerned with, this or that? And those questions, my options, this or that, would come from my understanding of the Enneagram, and almost like an optometrist, I'd be trying to say, which is better, 1 or 2? And from a clarity perspective of a student, if they said, oh, definitely 1, then it's like, okay, this is what works for you.
I see. So you're not necessarily trying to type the person, because you, like you said before, you can't type a person as well as they could type themselves.
Yes.
But you feel like you could at least, based on the knowledge of those triads, have a sense of, based on certain types of questions that a person might ask in rehearsal, certain things they might be concerned with in rehearsal, you're able to think, there's a really good chance this person could be more of a gut-motivated person or more of a heart-motivated person. And then I wonder if, as somebody who would know a lot about all these different types, that it could just also lead to better questions that you might ask as an educator too. That just knowing that there are these different types of people. A lot of times in education world, we talk a lot about different learning styles. It sounds to me like this is just in some ways another way to discuss that same concept, which is that all of our brains work differently. In this case, all of our motivations come from different places. So have you kind of pushed Enneagram into your other parts of your life? Like, is this something where, are you the person who goes to the family reunion and says, here, everybody take this test? Like, is this, like, how into this are you? Is my question. GraphitePublishing.com is a website that sells sheet music directly to you in PDF form, and it's got a stable of composers that you know, and they're all so fantastic. Many of them have been on this show in Composer Exposure episodes. Christopher Harris, Eric Barnum, David Von Kampen, Jocelyn Hagen, Tim Takash, just so many more. Joshua Shank. They're just great composers on there. And oftentimes, these are composers that publish other places as well, which is why you know their names. But Graphite is a unique entity and a great company led by Tim and Jocelyn, and they are giving voice and giving ownership to composers in the digital music format, which is convenient for you, meaning you get the music right away, but it's also very helpful for the composers. They own a bigger share of what they sell. So it's a good way to support living composers. And also they have an amazing search engine on there, which allows you to zero in on the exact kind of song you're looking for, and it pulls it right up for you. So I highly recommend heading over to graphitepublishing.com and using Choralosophy at checkout to save 10%.
I'm very into it. I'm 2/3 of the way through a professional certification program because I have a desire to teach the Enneagram.
Okay.
So I'm very into it. I'm committed.
Right.
But I'm not the person who, I guess it'd probably be better to ask my family. I don't see myself as the person that shows up and tries to push any kind of, let me tell you about yourself.
Right.
Let me tell you who you are. Kind of going back to what you were saying, like every type, I don't think that I would try to figure out the Enneagram type of a classroom full of students, but I find it valuable just having an awareness. There's 9 really distinct motivations that are driving this classroom full of people. So I can look out and with certainty know that there's going to be frustrations. Certain learners are going to be frustrated with me because I'm not giving them what they need or what they want. There will be frustration with each other. But there's also so much potential for them to kind of become their best self or find the most fulfillment because they've met their deepest need according to what their type is.
Right.
Every type has a core fear, something that they work hard to try to avoid in life, and every type has a core motivation, something that they're striving for, like
right,
almost their why they are here kind of thing. And so if I can start to piece that up for people, that's extremely rich and fulfilling from a music educator standpoint. I'll just give an example from one type. The type 1 is known as the reformer, or sometimes the perfectionist. And this is someone whose core motivation is to be good, like really good, not make mistakes, not cause any problems.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not bad, I am good. And their greatest fear is to be like imperfect, you know,
Right.
to have fault. And so it's very difficult for a type 1 to feel true, deep satisfaction with a performance because their inner critic is very, very strong.
Right.
If I have an awareness that, like, this person really struggles to see the good in what they did, there's a way to kind of help them see that or get them to be, like, quiet that inner critic and think about how your best friend would have received this in the audience. Are they going to be saying all of those things about your performance?
Mm-hmm.
You know, maybe introduce self-compassion, and that will enhance the whole lifetime of music making for that person to get the piece of the puzzle.
Right. So, and I think that's an important thing that you just bring up there, which is that the Enneagram doesn't claim that once you know what your type is, that you are forever doomed to only be able to function on that wavelength. I think part of the purpose of studying it is that once you know what your underlying fear or motivations are, then it's easier for you to then kind of face the world with wider open eyes, maybe about why you're doing what you're doing, and so I think that's really good, and I can see in a music classroom, I can definitely see all kinds of issues that would creep up if we said, okay, everyone's gonna take the Enneagram test right now. You'd have probably some parents mad that you're cult indoctrinating some whatever because of the picture, and I'll put the image up in the show notes so that people can see what it is. But so you'd have to deal with that. You'd have to deal with the time issue. But I think I hear what you're saying, which is that it's not necessarily knowing what every type with every wing is of every kid in the room or every student in the room. It's about you as the teacher knowing what are all these types that might be out there so that you can know how to balance them, how to create opportunities for, you said earlier, I love this because there was the knowledge that there are going to be people in the room frustrated with each other.
Yeah.
And why that might be, because you'd have the knowledge, if you've studied all this, you would know very clearly that this person could be frustrated with this person because they don't understand the motivation of this person for why they're doing what they're doing. And I can even imagine going back into the classroom with the very small amount of knowledge that I have about the Enneagram now, being able to kind of give some leading comments to the class, pointing out certain types of behaviors and recognizing certain motivations that might not be there. Because I think a lot of times we get angry with each other for what we assume is the reason for the thing that was done, more than what the actual thing that was done. Like, so, here's a comment you said to me, and I'm gonna get upset with you because of why I think you said it. And it's very rarely the actual comment itself. And so I think that's something Enneagram does really well.
Yeah.
So, am I allowed to ask your type?
Of course, yeah. So I have determined my type through a lot of self-inquiry. I initially thought that I was a type 4.
Okay.
And I believed that because the type 4 is known as the individualist, sometimes the romantic. A huge driving factor for them is authenticity and being unique. So I thought that described me because I don't like to wear any masks or put on any kind of false social front. You get what you get. And I was like, yeah, that sounds like me. And they tend to be very creative And so I have a lifetime of art and music, and I thought, okay, I'm a type 4. But the more I learned, I am very certain at this point that I'm a type 9,
Okay.
which is known as the peacemaker. Sometimes they call them the mediator. And I came to that conclusion when I learned the core fear of a type 9 is conflict. And so conflict avoidance is kind of my superpower. And that resonated a lot. I reflected on my whole life and realized in a kind of sad way how much I had missed out on because I was afraid of upsetting someone or rocking the boat or asserting myself. I'll just take the path of least resistance, and the positive side of that is I'm a really easygoing, laid-back person. Some path of growth for me is to realize that conflict isn't bad in itself. There are certain conflicts that are worth having.
Yeah, okay, so you said that originally you thought you were a 4, and then over time learned that that's not the case. One of the stereotypes with the Enneagram is that you can't just take the test on Facebook that you saw someone link and it's done. What is the process from thinking you're a 4 to discovering that you're a 9? Are there books that you're reading? Could you recommend some books to people that maybe would be accessible for a new person to this?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm assuming that you went through a process of kind of more study that changed your mind. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah. So walk us through that a little bit. Have you renewed your Sight Reading Factory membership yet this year for you and all of your students? If not, get started. It's not ever too late, in my opinion, to give your students the gift of confident literacy and the empowerment that brings. It's amazing what happens when you really start to see the growth and you see that confidence build in their eyes. You can always use Corelosophy at checkout to get 10% off your whole order. For a school's order, that's a big savings, and you can use that code every time you renew each school year.
So the book I would recommend first is called The Essential Enneagram by Dr. David Daniels, and it is a small, thin, only the essential information about the Enneagram is in there. Everything you need to know to determine what you are and what you aren't is in there.
Okay.
And then a larger book that is a good follow-on to that is The Enneagram by Russ Hudson and Don Rizzo, authors who have really devoted their lives to the Enneagram. Don Rizzo and Russ Hudson have an organization called the Enneagram Institute. They have a really great online test called the RHETI, RHETI, and you can access that from their website, enneagraminstitute.com. That is one that you have to pay, I think, $12 to take, but your results are very thorough, and I believe it gives you 3 types, that you are likely one of these 3 types, and then you get about 21 pages of stuff to read through.
I think I did that one.
Okay.
Yeah, through the class. Yeah, interesting. Okay. Yeah, so I mentioned this, but I'm an 8 wing 7 that I as far as I can tell so far. And I feel pretty darn confident that because I don't really resonate with anything else on any of the other numbers that resonate. It's like, this is me. Mm-hmm. That is very clearly me. Could tell us a little bit about the wing thing. What does that mean?
Okay. The numbers go in chronological order around the Enneagram shape. And so if you are a 1, you could have a wing of a 9 or a 2. If you are a 2, you could have a wing of a 1 or a 3. It's one of your neighbor numbers that is a personality type that you kind of pull from to add on to your personality.
Right. Because nobody's just one thing all the time.
Correct.
And so these are kind of, and I imagine this has to be somewhere built into the system where there was those triads you mentioned at the beginning, that some of these, as you go around the circle, there are certain types of overlap from one to the next anyway, and people who are head centered or whatever, gut centered, like you mentioned before. I mean, that all kind of makes sense, and I know for me, probably the thing that got me the most interested in this from the very beginning was starting to read the way an 8 is described in there as being somebody who is quite frequently misunderstood and mostly related to those underlying motivations, right? So you could, for example, for me, I started my bell started going off when I started reading things like an 8. An 8 will frequently be seen as kind of almost gruff or confrontational or all kinds of negative things. But then what people tend to not realize is that they are also fiercely loyal, very protective, and sometimes if you see a person who is behaving in that way, they might be trying to set something right, like they're focused on the task and they have to fix it, and right.
Yeah.
And so I was like, and sometimes they just want to be seen in that way, like they want to be, and I was like, oh my goodness, yes, that's me, because half the time I interact with people, I'm at work and I'm in work mode. And I started to read more stuff about those that personality, I guess, center, or that part of the triangle or the circle or whatever, and thinking, my goodness, yes, that's what I'm doing when I go into work mode. I'm trying to help you all by being organized, by being able to do the task, and if I hurt your feelings along the way, we can fix that later.
Yeah.
Because right now we need to do the thing, right? And so, but at the same time, I liked that it's not telling me, at least I read The Path Between Us, the Suzanne Stabile book.
That's also
for
a
the
good
class,
one.
yeah.
Yeah.
And how she's explaining to us in that book that knowing this about yourself does not give you license to just run over people. Like that's not what it's telling you. It's saying you need to be aware that if you're not careful, this is a thing you will do. And so I really liked that framing of, it's okay that you are the way you are, meaning I can see that there is an underlying motivation in why you do the things you do that is good, but you also need to be aware of how it can hurt people.
Yes.
And that's so great, because I don't really feel like you get that from a lot of other personality tests.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And for an 8, for a type 8, that's pretty clear and easy. Like, oh, I'm very efficient and really task oriented, maybe even like in certain scenarios more task oriented than people oriented. The people are going to accomplish task. And so it's pretty clear and easy to see how, okay, that could be overwhelming, big energy, there's a wake behind all of that work. In other types, it can be a lot more just tricky. I find that for mine, because as a 9, the way that I hurt people in my life is through like passive aggression. And so it's having to see that my lack of doing things is problematic and painful. I kind of disengage or withdraw, and it's sending out a very unclear message of, do you not like me anymore? Or are we okay? What's going on? So, and every type has their thing, but I love that about the Enneagram. And it is not meant to be, I love that you brought that up. It's not a license to say, well, this is how I am, so now y'all get to deal with it.
Right.
Really, we all have some of every type in us. And the goal is to have the first step, a kind of a self-awareness of, okay, these are my tacit drivers in life. When I don't even try, when I don't even think, this is the ego structure that comes out. Now that I'm aware of that, I can take some steps to kind of strengthen weaknesses and tone down strengths that have become too strong, that they're problems, and bring a little bit of balance. And then, if you look at the image, like a 9, I'm at the very top. So it would be good for me to to put some actual intentional effort into doing something a little bit like a 5 or a 4, which are numbers that are quite far away from my number. And even just the centers that I talked about. If I know I'm a body center, that my intelligence comes easiest in that way, I should work to develop my feeling center and my thinking center as well, so that I can have the richest experience of life, and almost kind of be like a really complete, whole, super complex and healthy individual.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense, and I think it's a good way for people to see that no, you aren't the best person in the world. In other words, like we tend to see, because humans are very self-centered, we tend to see our lens, see the world through our eyes, right? As obviously it's the only eyes we've got, and then make the assumption that other people are seeing things in a similar way, and for similar reasons, and if I assume that about someone, and yet they still disagree with me, or they still have an issue with something I say, well, then I'm at risk of thinking they're a bad person. And because if I'm a good person, I know I'm a good person, and that person is disagreeing with me, well, then there must be something wrong. And with the Enneagram, you kind of learn, well, maybe actually let's save the judgment that they're a bad person for later. And let's first assume that there might be some underlying motivations here that are very different than mine.
Yeah.
Some very different ways of looking at the world that are very different than mine. And I can see, kind of to take all this back into classroom and education type settings, I can see tons of implications for that for a teacher. To just know about this stuff, like to know about all of these different types of motivations, fears, what causes different types of people to approach certain situations in certain ways. I remember there was one story, and I think it was in the Path Between Us. There was an actual story about a musician, a kid who got invited to play at some gig. He was like a country guitar player or something, and got a chance to play with somebody who was pretty famous. And I don't remember the details, but it was. I think he was a 1 actually, because it was something about how, or no, it wasn't. He wasn't a 1. I don't remember the number. You might be able to fill in that for me if you from the story. But it was something about how he couldn't see how his presence in this band made any difference. So like he showed up to play because it was this cool opportunity, but afterwards he wasn't very excited about it. And somebody was talking to him and trying to ask him, and well, I mean, I'm sure they would have done fine, without me. And then, but then the people around him were thinking, you should be so, like, this was an opportunity of a lifetime, and you're sitting there just ho-hum like Eeyore about it, because he couldn't see that he contributed to that. It was just, it would have been fine without me. And I could think immediately, like, how many students I've had that are like that, where if I had known about this, of like what underlying fears would cause a person to think that way, when all objective signs point to, this is an awesome kid, great player, contributes amazing things to an ensemble, but he can't see it. He can't see it. And what if I was armed with some of these Enneagram knowledge, even just basic Enneagram knowledge, would I have been able to say the right thing to that kid at the right time to help them see from a different angle? And so, are there, in your experience, is there, do you feel like you're able to, that Enneagram has changed the way you interact with people in general, or do you have to like get to know people pretty deeply before this matters?
That's a really great question. I would say that it has changed the way that I interact with people in general, from a rather philosophical viewpoint.
Right.
The teacher that I have been studying with, her name is Anne Geary, and in the very first class that I took with her, she called it the Enneagram of Compassion, and I thought that was an outstanding title for it. And that's how I would describe the change of interacting with people in general. I just have that understanding that there's 9 distinct points of view in the world, and they are all equally valid. It's very easy to say some aren't and some are, because I have my favorites and I have the ones that are harder. And then I'm like, okay, I have to suspend all of that. That's just opinion, and my ego structure, run wild. But they're all valid. There's no particular type that's better to be than another. It's great. We're lucky that we have them all, because they all add something to our collective existence that's incredibly important. So that's how I've changed. Like, I've tried just to see, okay, what's going on with this person? I'm more inquisitive than defensive with people in general.
Yeah.
When it gets to specific people, relationships, I do think that it takes time to get to know someone well, because there can be a lot of smoke and mirrors going on with a person, depending on how they were raised and whether there was any kind of celebration or affirmation for their tacit way of being, or if they feel like they need to work hard to be a different way to get that kind of celebration or affirmation because they were wildly different from their parents or something like that. But if you can cut through any of the smoke and mirrors, then sometimes it can be an incredibly great human experience, that friendship there, saying it's okay to be who you are, or maybe there's something else. I see something deeper here.
Yeah, and I think I touched on this a little bit before, but that's one of the reasons that I like Enneagram compared to many of the other types of personality tests, is because of that factor of, yes, it's okay to be who you are, but you can be better. And I'm biased towards that because I one of the things that drives me the craziest on social media and other types of places are these memes that we get assaulted with, which is basically just, no, you're okay exactly how you are. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to, you're fine. You don't need to get better. I'm like, no, like no one is a finished product. And we're kind of bombarded with that idea by culture, which is that that everyone's fine just the way they are. And I disagree. I think everyone is a project. But if we aren't the author of our own project, then things are a big problem. And I think that's one of the things I like about Enneagram for myself. But then also, like, I love the idea of just looking out at a classroom. And I think you said it this way a second ago, which is to be more inquisitive. Just looking at them with the curiosity of, like, I wonder how many of those 9 we have in this classroom. Probably if there's any number of students in there, it's all of them. There's a very good chance. Now, you could get, I don't know if it would be lucky or unlucky to go into a classroom of all 5s or whatever, but that's very unlikely. You're going to get a pretty wide swath of the population in there. And so just being open to that as a teacher, I think would be really cool and really smart. So I think there are some really good implications of that. What do you know, or is there anything that we should know about the history of the Enneagram? Like, where does this all come from? Is this a cult? Like, what? Talk to me about all of the things that people say about that.
Oh, I'm extremely uncomfortable right now. And that's coming from my personality type, because I want to be really open-minded and inclusive of all things. So this doesn't bother me in the slightest that there might be some kind of occult weird stuff thing. Yeah, it's like I don't have that experience, so therefore it's not. Right. Yeah. But I know that those concerns are out there, and that it's valid, and that's some other person's journey, which would be Like I could just, I don't actually feel really qualified to speak to the history of the Enneagram because it's ancient. It's both ancient and modern, and it's worth reading about. But it does show up in just about every major religion, which makes me feel good personally, because it gives it a universal quality that this is about human nature. This is about humanity, and there can be a divine spark in it regardless of how you perceive your higher power.
Right. Right. I would say that's true of a lot of things, that people should just experience them for themselves. Because I of course, I asked that question not to make you uncomfortable, but mostly as a joke. But you know, I read in just some of my first few searches on the Enneagram that there was that concern, and I think honestly the drawing itself of the circle probably does more than anything else just to make people, that looks like a cult symbol. You know, it kind of has that like appearance of, you know, one of those. But to me, it seems like when in my probably month and a half or two of diving into this now, I don't see anything that's even religious in it. Like there's nothing about a higher power beyond inherently in it that I can find.
Well, I will say, in regards to the symbol, the image might give more concern. And when I have taught this before, I had somebody joke with me afterwards that I was teaching some kind of like anarchy class, or like the symbol itself. But if you're going to post a link to it in the episode notes, so when you look at it, just know that it's mathematical, really. Enneagram is Latin for 9-sided figure, so we're talking about like a polygon or something. You know, there's like 9 points that make a figure, and then there's lines that connect the points, and those lines have meaning about relationships, the numbers one to the other. So it's
not going to conjure up Satan in your living room.
No, it's not.
Do you promise?
And like, this is where the Enneagram of compassion has expanded my view. I would normally have thought they're terrible people. They're they're not enlightened.
Yeah.
But that's my ego coming because I'm inclusive. I don't like conflict. And if you put very clear boundaries on a group, it creates exclusion.
That's going to set up
an inclusion,
a conflict point.
And that's breeding grounds for conflict. Yep. So I'm going to stay away from that with everything in me. But there's value in having strong community.
Right.
And having shared values. And
yeah, okay.
So,
yeah, that's all very great. And let's wrap this up with this then. Is there anything about the Enneagram that I just haven't that you just wish that everyone would know, and I haven't given you a chance to really dive into it?
There's one thing about it that I think is beneficial with understanding. It's like how you can layer it over music.
Great.
I just find it valuable. So we talked about the intellectual centers of body, heart, and mind. And then there's another group of 3 things, which is called the instincts. And so each person is driven by a primary instinctual drive. It's like the energy that moves you through life. And we all have a bit of every 3, but they're stacked different ways. And so they are a self-preserving instinct, which is concerned with, am I comfortable or am I not comfortable? And then there is a sexual instinctual drive, which is concerned with, am I bored or am I excited? And then there's a social instinctual drive, which is, am I included or am I excluded? These kind of major concerns.
Mm-hmm.
And I have just found that, like someone whose driving energy force is like dominant and self-preservation, they really value consistency in music. And it's like preparation, good preparation,
Mm-hmm.
so that there's no surprises. And then that can be at odds with someone who's driven by a sexual instinct, like, I'm bored. I'm bored by that consistency. Every time that this happens has to have its own like spark or magic.
Mm-hmm.
And then the social, is this inclusive or is this exclusive? If I do this, will it like make me look good? Or can we use this performance to some sort of good for the group? Could we make it a fundraiser and do something socially good for people with the work that we're doing? So these instinctual drives can come and be a kind of why. The why behind how you do your music.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And so, and this kind of ties it back to the very beginning, which is great, because we were talking about the, leading an ensemble and just trying to be the referee almost of knowing how these drives might all be there, and trying to create a rehearsal environment where everyone's desires and needs can be served, which is great. So thank you so much for talking me through all that. That's great.
Thank you for inviting me.
That was fun. Thank you, as always, for sticking around to the end of the episode. I'm assuming some of you listening are old Enneagram pros. Like I said, I am new to this, and in the last couple months, I didn't even know what Enneagram was. So I'm kind of exploring this topic. Nothing like exploring a topic for the first time in your life in public in front of people, but that's my curse, I guess, for being a podcaster. I'm hoping you have some ideas. I know I do. As I learn more about the Enneagram, I'm just more excited to get back into the classroom and start helping my kids mediate and have communication improve. Really, that's the goal. Every time I go back into the classroom, I'm trying to figure out how to make it better than last time. And so hopefully this is just one of many tools that you're able to come across on the Choreolosophy podcast. If you appreciate the content that you hear here on the podcast, there are lots of things you can do to help. Of course, the show is completely listener supported. So financially, I earn nothing. No one pays me anything unless you make certain choices, which are to head to the Patreon to chip in $3 a month. That you'd be surprised how big of a deal that is. There are anywhere between, well, let's just say on an average, maybe 2,000 people or so that access this content. If every single one of you were to chip in $3 a month, I could do this for my full-time job. I don't expect that to happen, but just to give you an idea, if you think, oh, $3 a month is just, there's no way that's a big deal. It adds up and the costs add up. So that's a big help. Plus heading over to any of the sponsors and using the promo code, that's a big deal too. Voce Vista, Sight Reading Factory, Graphite Publishing, Ryan Main, My Music Folders. When you make a purchase there, they're awesome companies. You will get what you need from them and they will treat you well. Use that Choreolosophy checkout code and you'll get a coupon code every time you purchase. So that's all very helpful. If you have no capacity to help financially with the show, then there are other things that you can do, like rate, subscribe, share with your friends. Those are all the big, because those cost me money when you don't do it. So these are all things that we chip in together to make this product something that you can use and something that continues to be free to you. So that is my goal, and I plan on sticking around and doing this for a while. So thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time.